Hello and welcome to Channel 51 News. It is Friday, the 1st of August, and the horses are blowing out the birthday candles. We're flying through with this 2025, and all things are happening. And today, no different, of course, as we are going to deliver a different show for you this Friday. In a moment, I'm going to introduce you again, a regular with my work that I'm doing. Michael Arbon from Senator Ralph Babet's office has been, we've been able to secure Michael. Ralph is currently unavailable, unfortunately, but Michael knows exactly what's going on. Big news this week in relation to what we saw in the Parliament with the under-16s social media ban. And the thing was that Ralph had something to say, and he was able to do something very impressive, which was to bring together the Liberal Party and the Greens. Now, that is a big deal, because all of us have been operating in silos for a very long time, trying to work out how we're going to keep to our idealism, our ideals. But now what you've got to do is you've got to play politics. And this is a game that is always 51 plays 49. That's just how it is every single time. And in a moment, I'll bring Michael in. But the other big news that I want to tell you about is what's happened overnight in the United States in relation to the dropping of the declassified John Durham Annex by Senator Chuck Grassley, which implies or confirms that the FBI knowingly contributed to the takedown action orchestrated and paid for by Hillary Clinton, that's right, to take out the President of the United States in what can pretty much only be called a coup. I'm going to play for you now a short clip from Press Secretary Caroline Levitt, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce you to Michael after the break, because the Australian news is just as impressive, but on a completely different perspective. Take a look.
Well, I think a major organization of the national security apparatus, at least here at the White House within the National Security Council, has indeed taken place, and the president entrusts his current CIA director, John Ratcliffe, and our ODNI director, Tulsi Gabbard, to make the necessary changes to ensure classified intelligence, especially that could implement or hurt the national security of our country, does not make its way into the hands of irresponsible actors who want to politicize that intelligence for their own end. Since you brought up the declassification report that was put out by Senator Grassley today, I'm glad you brought it up, because this should be a story every outlet in this room should be covering. This is further evidence that Hillary Clinton approved the Russia hoax against President Trump. Her campaign financed it. Again, she approved it. And the FBI and the CIA were both weaponized to, as our director of CIA has said, accelerate this hoax against then candidate and former President Trump. To answer the heart of your question, the president wants to see justice served, and he trusts the Attorney General and the Department of Justice to implement that justice and hold these people accountable.
That is absolutely staggering information straight from the horse's mouth, and there's a whole lot more detail to go into. However, this week we saw something absolutely brilliant from the Senate party that is the United Australia Party, operating in the Senate, and Ralph Babet punching way above his weight, and he is a big boy, but what he was able to do was the culmination of years of work, the negotiation of playing politics, and made a big deal. Well, in his office, Michael Arbon, a regular to my shows and a great friend of freedom and, of course, transparency, joins me right now. Michael Arbon, welcome to Channel 51 News.
G'day, Jason. It's a pleasure to join you today.
Mate, it's a big deal. Goodness me, what we are seeing going on right now in the United States is something for the books. But what you did this week with Senator Babet is also a very significant move, because in Australia, we are always so far behind the eight ball how this thing plays out. And what he was able to do in relation to the social media ban, can you please fill us in on the plan, how it was executed, and then what came next?
Yeah, so most people in Australia would know that there's an under-16 social media ban coming through in the next few months. Actually, that will become a thing, where anyone who has access to a social media account will need to verify their age, but most likely comply with some sort of age assurance measure, which will continually verify your age via biometrics or using a camera or various other mechanisms. But what we focused on in the Senate this week wasn't actually that. It was the Internet Search Engine Services Online Safety Code, which is a code that's actually developed by big tech themselves and approved by our e-safety commissioner. And that code, which comes into force this December, would require not only those with social media accounts, but those just to use their standard Google search account to verify their age via an age verification process. And we're super worried about the surveillance and the privacy aspects of this. We know that it's a bit of a Trojan horse in terms of invading our right to privacy. And the best thing was we put up a motion that focused on the impacts of it in terms of surveillance and privacy, but also got the Senate to acknowledge that it's really dressed up as child protection, but that's not what this code is going to achieve. And probably the most important factor is, Jason, that we got the support of the entire Senate, less the Australian Labor Party. So, you know, you've got what they would call the far right and the far left working together, the Australian Greens. And I do want to acknowledge David Shoebridge. He's a senator from the Australian Greens who's been really vocal on this issue. And it's fantastic to see us on a unity ticket with this and seeing through the government lines and seeing it for what it truly is.
This is what, of course, is the process of what politics is. It's deal making to a point, but what you've actually struck upon is the idea that if you're going to play almost like the victim card, the Labor Party pushing really hard on this social media ban, but that earns the common interest in rebutting it of parties that should never technically be aligned, then you've really crossed a line. You've upset a lot of people here. So, Michael, what I might do is I'm going to run to a clip. This is consecutive clips from the Senate. I won't play all of it, but I want to show you Ralph, and then I want to show you Maria Kovacic and a little bit of David Shoebridge to sort of paint the picture of where we're at. Take a look. Seeing the writing on the wall, Senator Ralph Babet, in this compelling report put together by Cat A on X, he has successfully garnered the support of the Coalition and the Greens for his urgent motion against age assurance measures for access to the internet, with the majority agreeing this code entailed significant digital surveillance under the guise of child protection. The Coalition, they took aim at Julia Inman-Grant, and not only that, the Greens, they bought in as well. I'm going to play you now a collection of clips compiled by Cat A, and we'll come back.
Welcome, but let's not kid ourselves. This is not about protecting children. It is about building a surveillance infrastructure under the cover of safety. Now, under this new code, Australians who are logged into search engines like Google, Microsoft and others will be required to undergo age assurance. That's not a polite, how old are you at the cinema? That's government ID checks. That's biometrics scanning. That's data mining. Data mining. Now, we're rapidly marching towards a society where privacy online is not just frowned upon, but perhaps it's going to become illegal. Yes, we've got to protect kids online, but not by sacrificing the freedoms of every Australian adult in the process. The code's got to be amended. We've got to remove the age assurance requirement and just restore some common sense before the only thing that's going to be safe online is big tech's grip on all of our lives. To the Greens, I say thank you for supporting my motion in defence of privacy and against creeping surveillance. I never thought I'd say that, but thank you. Hell must have frozen over. To the Liberal Party, your We Believe statement says that you support the inalienable rights and freedoms of all people. Here is your chance to show it. Stand on the right side of history and join me in defending the Australian people. All senators support my motion, but let's see what the Libs do. Thank you.
Next up, Liberal Senator Maria Kovacic. She took aim at Julie Inman-Grant.
Safety Commissioner's dual role in developing, regulating and enforcing her own policies is unique, but the concentration of this authority is now raising concerns which may require greater scrutiny, for example through this Parliament. We must ensure, and this must always be the case with legislation and with delegated legislation, that the operations of bodies do not stray away from the intent of the Parliament when it was first established. Let's be clear, The E-Safety Commissioner is not an elected position. Their decisions do not come before the Parliament for us to scrutinise. The remit of the E-Safety Commissioner, without adequate safeguards, is getting out of hand, and we must pause to consider this. Ensuring every adult logs into an account to browse the internet is taking the E-Safety Commissioner's power to a new level, which must be debated and scrutinised further. But we can't lose sight of the fact that we must protect our children from online harms. Thank you.
And so Green Senator David Shoebridge said the code does entail significant digital surveillance dressed up as child protection.
This code does entail significant digital surveillance dressed up as child protection, and it won't achieve the child protection goals. It bypassed Parliament, it's ignored the evidence, some of it gathered by the government's own trial, and will harm people that it claims to protect. We support pausing this code, going back to the drawing board. Protecting children shouldn't mean surveilling everyone. We can have both safety and privacy, but not through this broken process. So what would work? Well, I tell you what would work: providing a statutory duty of care to the platforms, requiring that duty of care, and then putting in place clear
And before the vote, just jumping out there, Michael, because it'll keep going. We've got you too valuable time, but that's impressive. Everyone's finally seeing through it. So what has the government done wrong here? Why is everyone opposing this?
The government has done nothing. That's why. Not that they've done nothing wrong. So it was actually the Liberal Party that created the E-Safety Commissioner back in 2015, and that's probably when the major error was made. They have enabled this position to develop to one whereby the E-Safety Commissioner is really only accountable to herself. There is no parliamentary oversight. There is no review of the decisions that are made by her and her office. And she really is a law unto herself. And it's probably not her fault. It is the government's fault for not acting on that and fixing it sooner. So we're now in a position where for these codes, they're developed by big tech themselves. They're reviewed and approved by the E-Safety Commissioner. Those who are elected by the Australian people are not even involved in the process. Those who are accountable to us aren't touching it. And the internet is a much different place now than it was 10 years ago. That's the argument the Liberal Party are going to use, and it is somewhat valid. You know, they may have created this act with good intentions, but it's also an act that's full of holes and full of centralised power. And I am actually really pleased to hear Maria Kovacic say what she said, because that's actually an admission from the Liberal Party that what they created is no longer fit for purpose. And I really love it in Australia when we have the two major parties on opposite sides, because that means that this is an issue that's not going away, but it's only going to maintain its momentum that it's currently got if we, the people, continue to push it really hard from here on.
What was the result of the motion, therefore, and what did it achieve?
Yeah, so the initial urgency motion was very successful. So we had everyone but Labor support it. So that was successful. That's largely ceremonial. That just is an expression of the Senate that, hey, the government, you're out of touch. You need to do something about this. We followed up on Thursday, co-sponsored a motion with Senator Roberts, another one of the good guys, and that motion went an awful lot further. So not only looking into this code around internet search engines, but expanded into trying to create an inquiry to review the entire Online Safety Act from 2021, to look into the scope and accountability of the E-Safety Commissioner herself, because she is really, like I said, judge, jury and executioner when it comes to online safety, and also reviewing what's happened in the UK and Europe. We can learn from overseas. We know that there's some major issues around e-safety over there, and we know how much the measures they've taken have silenced free speech. So look, it was going to be a broad-reaching inquiry. We were negotiating right up till the second of the vote on Thursday, and we managed to maintain the support of the Liberal Party and the crossbench. But unfortunately, the Greens did decide to vote with Labor, which made which meant that that inquiry is not proceeding at this point in time. But as you can tell from the public statements made by David Shoebridge, I don't think we've lost the Greens for good. It's probably just politics yesterday. I don't know, Labor might have been able to throw the dog a bone temporarily, but I actually think the base of the Australian Greens, their voters, they are with us. And they see the issues here around privacy and surveillance, and they see the bigger picture. So we're not giving up. When Parliament resumes in the end of August, I'm hoping that over the next 4 weeks, Senator Babet can work with the Liberal Party, the crossbenchers and the Greens to try and find a way to squash and limit these powers of the E-Safety Commissioner, because it's completely out of hand.
So just to clarify, Parliament returned this week. Is that correct?
We had 2 weeks of sittings.
2 weeks,
last
that's
week
right.
and this week. Yeah.
And now Parliament resumes in a month's time, roughly.
Yeah. The last week in August is when we return. So we've now got a 4-week period to do the work that we need to come back really seriously. But it's not just the politicians. I'm hoping that this is misinformation, disinformation bill 2.0. And over the next 4 weeks, we need to build so much pressure from the general public on the Albanese government that they are forced to act on this issue. The youth of Australia are massively impacted, and so are everyone else, because age assurance measures are not just measures applied to those under 16 or of a certain age. In order to ensure that you are over 16 or you are who you say you are, these measures need to be applied to everyone. And it's not just showing your driver's license quickly to the Blockbuster video to prove that you're over 18 or whatever. It's true biometric scans. It's the ability to constantly verify that the person who is on their device, whether it be your phone or your laptop or your tablet, is who they say they are. And that's a massive amount of power handed over to big tech.
Yeah, I mean, it's staggering, isn't it, to think that you just want to hand over in this expectation that the general public will just go along with the government of the day under the guise of safety. Now, let's just paint a little picture. A few years ago, a 12-year-old could be deemed a mature minor and take an experimental COVID jab behind their own parents' back, seemingly to go along to get along with their friends' ultimate peer pressure and that of the system. But that same child, fast forward 4 years, could be 15 years and 11 months and can no longer have access to YouTube with their own account. And then the same government wants to introduce voting compulsorily to 16-year-olds. Why is there such an imbalance, and why isn't anyone being able to point out the fallacy of these arguments?
I can't tell you why. It just doesn't make any sense, does it, Jason? I actually can't logically tell you why. And I don't think they're just stupid. Look, if I'm to put on my conspiracy theory tinfoil hat, I would say that, mainstream media has lost control of the narrative. A lot of the world, we have a free flow of information at the moment. I think media is almost as free as it's been in living memory right now. X has been a really good revolution, and we actually have a lot of young people consuming podcasts and all sorts of different media forms, and sort of using their discernment to decide what's true, what's false, or actually can't I verify? There's a lot of things in this world that I can't tell you if they're true or false, but the good news is I have lots of different ideas in my head that I can discern for myself. And if you were to put that sort of hat on, you would say that these age assurance measures are going to, once again, centralize the sources where people can get their information. And I think that's a really bad thing for society.
Well, here we are, right? Because we are battling seriously the disinformation around COVID. We still haven't settled on the origins of COVID, but we've somehow walked ourselves into accepting, by not saying anything, that we're now part of some pandemic treaty from the WHO. And at the same time, you've got Five Eyes countries, including New Zealand, Australia, etc., caught now in a snag that we're going to talk about in a minute in relation to Kash Patel visiting Australia secretly this week and heading over to New Zealand. We need access to good information. You have now proven in Senator Babet's office in this next term in office and in the second half of his term that people are taking you seriously. You are bringing to the table proper concerning issues and, in fact, leading them to bring the Liberals dragging along, kicking and screaming, and then to agree with you. What do we need to do in the independent media, therefore, to be able to present this information in real time to the general public, to realise that we're all working together, and those on the other side of the fence can realise that we're the only ones actually covering this properly?
Yeah, the simple answer is to continue to cover it. That's all we need. We need this story to not disappear. And I think you'll find in independent media that the more you dig into this, so, you know, a lot of people will start with this search engine requirement. I actually walked down the street and someone before said, "Hey, great job this week. I saw you on some sort of interview." I was like, "Oh, wow, like the general public are onto this," and that's amazing. But, you know, I think if the people can start with this search engine requirement and look into what age assurance really means, then that expands very quickly to that under 16 social media ban. And no longer is it just banning under 16s. It's like, well, this age assurance stuff, it's everywhere. I'm now going to be verified all the time when I'm on my device. You know, I put a post up last night. You didn't need to provide proof of ID to access an encyclopedia or a dictionary, or to hire a book back in the day. But in this modern world, that those same things that we're doing online, they're now going to have to require us to fully verify ourselves all the time. And, you know, data security, where does that data go? How is it stored, and what is it used for? Is it used against you, or is it something that's, we don't really know, Jason. All of these things are happening behind closed doors. They're being approved by one person, Julian Grant, which is absolutely wild. But the thing is that the codes, the companies that these codes apply to are drafting them themselves. Digi Group is working with Google and the likes to draft these codes and give them to Julian Grant. So, you know, it's almost like the fox is guarding the hen house. So the general public are going to care a lot about this. I don't stand in the way of things like, you know, making sure that search engines are held to account by not allowing pornography to be accessed when you search. I think that's ridiculous. They should limit that stuff. High impact violence, that's bad as well. But, you know, the average punter using a Google search engine, you shouldn't have to be fully tracked in order to just look up the weather. That's ridiculous.
Well, absolutely. And of course, if you are still able to access YouTube without an account, so you can't comment, you can still watch the clips, but you are then in a way able to watch anything. But the problem is also that YouTube might have some odd content getting through, which we've always worried about why that is. That certain things do and other things get censored. But it is a G-rated site, more or less. It's not like on X, for example, that there is X-rated material that pops up on X and that can be searchable. And, of course, Facebook masquerades as being serious, but then all sorts of crazy stuff gets into those groups that are online as well. So it's certainly not an even keel. And I'm certainly not a defender of YouTube here, but you would think that they've kicked an own goal. If the same child cannot log in with an account, wouldn't you think the burden of proof or the onus would be on going back to the tech companies and saying, guys, limit your commenting and limit your algorithms to be a little bit more strict in this sense, because all they're really interested in is keeping you on that site, consuming the videos and seeing the ads that are paying for it all, right?
Yeah, and the question is, what do they stand to gain by this, the tech companies? So if you're able to verify the age and details of the person who's accessing that content, that's very, very valuable data. And I don't know the details as to whether that data is stored or what happens, but you know, we have to look at what they stand to gain through this process as well. That's something that we really need a Senate inquiry to go through, because I'm not smart enough to know all of those details yet. But it would be fantastic to receive public submissions from those who do really understand this stuff, and to have public hearings where you can get Julian Grant, you can get the head of Google, you can get all of these people on the stand testifying in the Australian Senate, so that publicly, public hearings, that's what they are, that result from a Senate inquiry. And the Australian people, once again, would then have that opportunity to see them on the spot, explain who, where, what, how, what they're doing and why it's good, or where the loopholes are that need to be closed.
So to clarify, the motion to set up an inquiry failed because the Greens kind of flipped at the last minute. What was the vote count therefore, roughly?
Yeah, so the vote count, let me just quickly pull it up. So it was 34 to 27. So the Australian Greens are 11. So with the Greens, the ayes have it easily. So we had UAP, so Senator Babet, we had the One Nation senators, we had the Liberal Party, the Nationals, we had Tammy Tyrrell from Tasmania, David Pocock and Senator Payman. So you couldn't get a more diverse bunch than that. That's a pretty wild group to be sticking together and voting. On the other side, we had Labor, the Greens, and I actually think Lydia Thorpe, I might have missed her yesterday, but I think she might have slipped over to that side this time. But her vote doesn't matter. The Greens actually call the shots in the Senate. Whoever gets the Greens, if you have the Liberal Party, you win. Labor cannot get any piece of legislation or any motion passed without either the support of the Labor Party or the Liberal Nationals. They need one or the other. So you take the Greens away from Labor and Labor's got nothing. They lose.
So to clarify, how often does Liberal support Labor in the Senate on a general type of motion or vote? Is it common, or are they actually voting like a uni party? Have you got any examples?
No, so it's not that common. So the Greens are the most common party that Labor would rely upon. But yeah, occasionally you do see the Liberal Party voting with Labor. I don't have any recent examples of that. We've only been sitting for a week, and the first week all they did was argue about who was more important than the other person, and it was all just personality politics. We didn't really do anything meaningful. But this week, the rubber hit the road and we're finally able to move that motion. I'll note that Senator Babet only really gets one chance a year to move an urgency motion, so you want to really make sure it's something that punches, and we thought there's nothing more urgent than this. And the thing that makes it very newsworthy and very relevant to everyone is we have a ticking clock, and it's December when this stuff comes in. We don't have much time, but the best thing about that is urgency is what creates action. So we can use that urgency now to make sure that every person out there is aware and they push back so hard on the Labor Party. But also, I would encourage you to thank the Greens for voting on that urgency motion. Thank them for the comments they've made publicly. But we just now need to urge them to force it, to take it to the next step so we can actually change this and force the Labor Party to step in and delay and then fix what's happening.
What parliamentarian would not want parliamentary oversight on an American bureaucrat occupying a brand new idea called the E-Safety Commissioner? What justification could there be?
One that's very worried about the outcome of that inquiry, Jason. There's only one reason, that they can't control the process. So the thing is, this Senate committee we're referring to as well, I think it had 2 or 3 Liberals, 1 Green, and only a couple of Labor members. So they know that they can't control the outcome. And you know how politics works. You only go to an inquiry when you know what the outcome is going to be. The Labor Party know this outcome is going to be, don't do it, delay it, fix it, and maybe don't even do it in the end. Like, that's how it's going to end up, because there are so many holes in what is happening here with online safety. They know the Safety Commission is going to be reined in and the recommendations are going to be really bad for that office. That's why they're standing against it.
Well, it's all about the media holding the government to account, and it's up to the Senate parties to hold the government to account. And Michael, you have certainly done that in this week with Senator Ralph Babet. It's a big deal. Now, if we cross over now to what we just saw in the US and why it's so imperative for us here in Australia, it automatically is. But the fact that we've just learnt this today off the ABC, the Home Affairs Minister, Tony Burke, met with FBI Director Kash Patel during a secretive Australian visit. Were you aware of this?
Not at all. You made me aware of it this morning when you gave me a call and asked me to jump on this interview. It's crazy, isn't it, that Tony Burke would go and dine with Kash Patel, a Trump-appointed FBI head, and no one knows about it. The Americans, the Australians, and I actually think it was it Senator Shoebridge again from the Greens that pointed this out yesterday in the Senate? Like, why would you meet secretly with the FBI chief? That's the question. It's a really big meeting. We haven't even been able to get a meeting with the president of the US yet. Our prime minister hasn't got anywhere near him. But, we've got the FBI director here in Australia and it's all secret squirrel.
It's a big deal, and to read from that article for the benefit of those that have just caught up to this. So FBI Director Kash Patel stopped briefly in Australia this week, dined with Tony Burke. Neither the Australian nor US governments flagged the visit, with Mr. Burke only confirming it took place after being contacted by the ABC. Meanwhile, Patel is in the region to open a permanent FBI office in New Zealand. Now, there were mentions here in this particular article. Greens Home Affairs spokesman David Shoebridge on Thursday called on the government to provide more transparency over the meeting. So, David Shoebridge, congratulations and thank you. And we must work together. Politics is a blood sport, but it is all about 51 defeats 49 every single time. So now we can see what's actually happening in the game of politics. The minister understandably wanted his meeting with the defender of the January 6 rioters kept secret, he said. That's a very, very odd statement, though. Equally understandably, the Australian public has an interest in knowing who our Minister for Home Affairs is meeting with and why. Now, where I'm going with that, if we are going to call up January 6 at this point, and that's the reason, and we're playing a game of manners, for goodness sake, and they're trying to discredit the FBI, Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, on the eve of the John Durham Annex being released in the United States, implicating the former FBI effectively in a coup d'etat against the President of the United States. Do these people realise what's going on here, or is this news so hot that it is only the people that are following on the details waiting for this to explode? How do you read this together?
Yeah, I'd say the news is probably so hot. People are waiting to be informed, Jason, and that's clearly what you're doing. You made me aware of this first thing this morning, and I haven't had a chance to get my head right around it. But it's amazing that they'd go straight to the January 6th thing to try and discredit the head of the FBI. I think that's absolutely wild. And the other thing that sort of comes to mind for me is, you know, setting up an FBI office in New Zealand, what's the chances of that maybe happening in Australia as well? It's kind of weird that they would just pick New Zealand. It's a pretty small country. We just need to know why they met. We need the minister himself to step up and say, hey, look, we met, we discussed these things, you know, we're Five Eyes, this is what we're working on. And maybe we are going to look at setting up an office here. I don't know what they're doing. It's only speculation for me at this point in time. But, you know, whenever the government hides something, they're hiding it for a reason. You know, that's a really big meeting to secure. It's almost something that you would probably want to celebrate. Meeting with the FBI director is a massive achievement for the minister, but yeah, no idea.
If Donald Trump has come out this week and pointed the finger at the US establishment, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and accused them of treason, if Anthony Albanese cannot get a phone call with the President of the United States, but the FBI director, who technically is the one doing the groundwork here to take these people down for treason, is meeting with Tony Burke, one may have to at least speculate in the interim that he is either coming to ask for evidence or he's giving a warning here, because the point with that, the layer upon layer in this, is that we can't get this conversation regarding the tariffs. And August 1 US time was meant to be the cutoff for the US setting tariffs, which I'm sure that every politician in that house, green and red, is wondering what's going on, because they have to go back to their constituents and say, well, it was out of our hands. We couldn't do anything. We didn't know. But that doesn't cut it. Someone has to be held accountable.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for that news. I did make special note actually of the way that we sort of backflipped on the ban on US beef, where we seem to be just trying to do just these little tiny bits to appease them. But Trump hasn't really announced anything on Australia yet, has he? He's gone to Europe and he's done deals. He's shaken hands and they've found a way to work together. But we can't get anywhere near him, which really worries me. I feel like the way that we're going, especially with Trump's government, the way that they really dislike surveillance states and big governments and they really love freedom of speech, I feel like that is a big lever for Trump to pull against Australia, the way that we're descending to this form of digital dystopia. And it really concerns me, because we all know how Trump operates. He's going to shoot it really straight. And, you know, I am hoping that Trump does mention the way that we are becoming a nanny state. And I'm hoping that is a bit of a lever that applies some more pressure on the issue that we spoke about before, actually, to the Australian government to force them to really move and just back off. You don't need to be involved in every aspect of our life.
Well, I'm going to show you now. This is where we are. So this is Trump posting on his own Truth Social accounts yesterday. He puts this one up, be calm in the storm. We knew this day would come. It's followed up with this particular post again. Treason evidence proves the FBI and CIA were deeply involved in the historic 2020 election lie that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian propaganda. So that now influences January 6th. So I don't know where Shoebridge is going with that one. And then, of course, you've got this one. Unless this happens, nothing will change. I mean, there are devoted Trump supporters who are now going, OMG, we are now at uncharted waters and the expectation is off the charts. And Michael, whilst you've got 4 weeks to do the work that is what you are employed to do for the Australian people, you must be watching on now thinking, my goodness me, come 4 weeks' time, we could be in a very, very different world.
Yeah, who knows what the world will look like tomorrow, Jason? It's certainly not boring. There's a lot happening, and you know, those posts are incredibly serious. Like if any of those things that he's sort of implying in those posts happen, they change the world as we know it really quickly. So yes, we're obviously keeping our finger on the pulse, but we'll continue to focus on what we can control, which is our patch. But you know, I can only see this current US government being a massive help to what we're trying to achieve in Parliament, because the more transparency, the more truth we can get out there, the better. So I am thankful for the Trump administration. And, you know, you mentioned the World Health Organization, those sorts of things before. They are leading the way. They've rejected the international health regulations and they're paving the way to exit the WHO as well, because they know that organization also has it's moved well beyond its remit. It's no longer working for the American people or the Australian people.
Now, I know I've gone over time without a booking today, and I appreciate it immensely. And I know that you are certainly tuned in on economics. Everyone's hoping next week the Reserve Bank will lower interest rates to give everyone a little bit of a reprieve. The government has just passed the 20% discount on HEX, which a lot of people are frustrated with because, one, others have already paid theirs off. But the point there is that Paul Keating invented HEX. He invented indexation and he invented the thresholds. So for Labor to come in, 30 years later and go, well, now we're giving a discount, it just feels arbitrary and advantageous and self-serving. But at the same time, our students, well, all our kids are suffering where you got to pay $1 million to get into a home today. So financial nihilism, the giving up, the struggle of our young kids. Now, I found something very disturbing this week from a friend of mine in Victoria who told me when I shared some information about gambling amongst young people today, and she described to me that the reasons that a lot of kids are gambling is because those that want to get ahead realize it is impossible to save a housing deposit, and they are allocating a certain amount of money that they're earning, a lot of them as tradies, to punt, to gamble, to try and win their way to a house deposit. Now, this is incredibly disturbing, but could you imagine that we're in a situation that no one is talking about this except parents are bringing this to our attention, whereas the other side are demanding that the government take from their parents and grandparents and hand it out like we're seeing in the United States under the Mamdani private property thing. We are at a crisis point with our youth today, and no one is talking to them and no one knows what to say. How are you reading it? I know it's incremental, but is there a time and a place for open forum and discussion that the House is finally going to say, okay, now we're listening?
Yeah, gambling, I actually looked into that the other week. So I think Aussies lose about $7 billion a year on lottery tickets alone. So it's pretty wild. And I did the numbers. So I think it's a 1 in 134 million chance of winning Div 1 Powerball. And Australians have a 1 in 12,000 chance of being struck by lightning in their lifetime. So if you compare lightning to Powerball, your odds of winning are close to zero. Like you have very little chance. And the sad thing is the reason that people usually gamble is to give themselves a little bit of hope in life. And if you are leaning on impossible odds to try and get you out of a scenario, that means you are in an impossible scenario. And we know that, Australian housing, a house used to be about 3 times household income in the 1990s. And a lot of those households were actually single income households. Now we're talking the average house of being in excess of 9.7 times household incomes. And we have dual household incomes as the mainstay now. So it's exponentially worse than it used to be. And as I always say, Jason, it's very simple. The solution is actually less government. Every time governments step into these things, they provide more demand, more demand side stimulus, and they reduce the value of our dollar with everything they do. They print money, they put out first homeowners grants, and now we're guaranteeing ridiculous loans. So the government and taxpayers are guaranteeing loans, nearly all home loans actually, for first home buyers through the home loan guarantee scheme. And we're doing things like shared equity, where the government owns 30 or 40% of the house and you only own 60 or 70% of it. And, you know, banks are now doing 40-year home loans. I'm a big fan of Dave Ramsey in the US. I don't know if you follow him, but everyone should live within their means. We shouldn't have ridiculous amounts of credit, and we should be able to clear our home loan in 10 to 15 years. That's what we should aim to do in a perfect world. And the only way to achieve that is for government to get out of it. And, you know, house prices do have to fall. They are overvalued as a percentage of income. And if the government just stepped out, I think you'd find the market would sort itself out. We probably need some tighter lending restrictions. I think banks are lending too much and making us slaves to debt. I'm not one for too many regulations, but in that case, I think if you can't clear your home loan in 15 to 20 years, it's too much. It's too much debt, and it's going to take you away from raising your own kids and put too much pressure on you. So, you know, there's just my thoughts on that. But bottom line, we need to let the market fall sometimes and stop treating the Australian people like children. But the Australian people need to stop relying on daddy government too. And don't scream out to the government when times get tough. Tough times create opportunities. So use that next time it occurs.
Now, these are all questions without notice, and I'm only going to ask for just a quick point. Childcare and the disaster that we saw with the child abuse, is Senator Babet concerned, and is there anything that he can do?
Yeah, so they quickly screamed, you know, remove all men from childcares and whatever. And I'll just talk from my own perspective, but I'm sure Senator Babet would have similar perspectives. I work 2 jobs so my wife can stay home and raise our kids. And her job is a hell of a lot harder than what I do at work. I'm just talking to you, Jason. It's not too bad at all. But she does an amazing job, but our kids have stability. Our house is always in order. And it just works. So I think instead of screaming out about childcare and asking the government to do something, we need to change our own lives and live within our means. Buy a cheaper house. Don't try and keep up with the Joneses, but focus on the things that really matter. So as a parent, I'd say do everything you can to try and spend as much time with your kids while they're young. And if that involves living in a cheaper house and maybe just having one partner work a bit harder than the other one in order to bring in that income that keeps you above board, I think that's a good thing. Raise your own kids, take as much time as you can with them, and that's the best thing that we can do to combat that issue. These guys that commit these child abuse, they deserve, I can't even say it, but it's absolutely disgusting. I think Senator Babet's called for the wood chipper before, and he's not far from wrong there. It's absolutely abhorrent. Yeah,
he doesn't hold back. Look, the other two quick things very quickly, just to get them on the record. Of course, a lot of people concerned with over immigration. And of course, we've seen what's happening in Europe. Trump's made big warnings to Europe that they're in trouble. How does one create a balance here to not be an alarmist, not to be considered a racist, but to be considered an economic rationalist, if you will, to realise that the purpose of the government is to serve the Australian people, not to appease overseas and have this kind of woke agenda here. How do you create a balance here to at least, this is all about argument. It's not about being ruled upon. I mean, we want to be able to govern ourselves. You've already advocated for less government. We just don't want to be ruled, but we want to be able to have the debate and the conversation and not be named or labelled or mocked or ridiculed for having it.
Yeah. So our immigration system is not right. It doesn't focus on Australia first. It's wild. We have a lot of people migrating via the education system as well, and sort of, you know, enrolling in education, then finding a way to get a permanent residency following that. But our entire target and focus on immigration needs to change. Yes, we need lower numbers now because we have had way too many over the past 2 years, and the government has not reduced it enough this year. It's still continuing on. If you look at GDP, per capita GDP has gone backwards for most quarters over the past 2 years. Yes, the pie is getting bigger, but the slice of the pie that we all get is getting smaller every quarter. And that is a bad thing. It means the system is designed wrong. But from a cultural perspective, especially in the likes of Sydney and Melbourne, we've got parallel societies essentially popping up in certain suburbs. That means immigration isn't working. Australia has a culture that we love. and most people should be moving to Australia to partake in that culture and embrace it. If you find people creating parallel societies and their own cultures within Australia, that's not okay. Multi-ethnic but not multicultural is the approach that I would take. When you come to Australia, you come here because you love our way of life. You don't bring your entire way of life here and try and live in a different culture in Australia. That's not going to work, and that's not going to build a cohesive society for us.
Now, the last question is resources and the value of resources, and many people realising that countries like Qatar have been able to enrich the general public with very low income tax, free education, free healthcare, etc., 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 as a result of distribution of resources. Now, we've learnt just this year that there was a massive 55 billion tonnes of iron ore found in a reserve in Western Australia, valued at somewhere between $4 and $7 trillion. If you were to divide that amongst the Australian people of 26 million people, you're talking roughly $250,000 each. In other words, we are that resources rich in this country that if we were able to strike a better deal, we wouldn't need to worry about mortgages and debts. For example, you could literally be 30 years old and own your house outright. Is there, again, an opportunity for a discussion about this for at least with the National Party or a party that gives a damn? Because if we're going to change government in this country, it will be one in the regions, not in the cities. They're gone. The regions is where this is going to happen. Is this something that happens in Senator Babet's office?
I think the bigger issue, yes, that's a problem, but the biggest issue is actually net zero. Net zero is the reason why we can't develop and reap the benefits from these resources. So Treasurer Chalmers has posted a surplus the past 3 years, not due to good management, but mostly due to a resources boom again. That's what's keeping him in business. So we do get a decent amount of taxes and a decent amount of, revenue from these resources. Yes, I think on the gas perspective especially, we miss out big time compared to other nations. But the biggest issue is actually net zero, because what it's doing is it's meaning that we're not approving the mines that we need to approve. There's so much red and green tape and so much compliance burden that Australia should have no federal debt. That is a no-brainer. There is no reason why we should have any debt. But for as long as we've got climate change leading the agenda, which it is, every bill I look at has climate provisions, and it's getting harder and harder, and they keep tightening the screws. We'll get to the point where the money just goes offshore and says, yes, we know Australia has the best resources, but they're just bloody impossible to deal with. So then they'll go elsewhere where a government will actually work with them to create the prosperity for the people.
Michael, once again, a breath of fresh air, a voice of reason, and a genuine feeling of hope that the political process has someone in it that is actually aware of what's going on, but at the same time working within the system. You're not there screaming at the clouds. You're not there talking nonsense. You are dealing with the issues of the day and treating us all with the respect that we deserve as effectively your employer. And that's no disrespect. It is just an acknowledgement of the system. And at the same time, you're able to tell us that government needs to be reduced, and that therefore is the answer. We stand at the absolute gateway to something brand new that is coming down the line very soon. And I, for one, could not be more content that you are in there, in Ralph's office, working for us, the Australians. And I know there are many idealists out there that will pick on all of us and criticise just the same. But goodness me, you're the man for the job, working with the man who has the job. And thank you for your time today on Channel 51.
Thank you, Jason, and thanks for everything that you do to touch the issues that many don't want to. So appreciate that.
Well, it's wonderful. So, look, everyone, thanks, Michael Arbon, for coming on today for the news show. It's a different Friday edition because of circumstances that are on. I thank everyone for watching and tuning in. This is the first week of the Channel 51 News as a replacement for my old show that I was doing since January of this year, and this is how it works. You can check me out at jasonqcitizen.substack.com, channel51news.com.au, and you'll be able to see this show from next week are syndicated to Cafe Lockdown and also on WRMI Global Radio emanating out of Florida in the US, of which I'm quite proud of all of that. And then tonight, also on my pages here on X, Jason Q Citizen 1 and the Substacks as well, and Channel 51 News, an interview with South Australian lady Maria Schmandy, who is going to knock your socks off in terms of what she went through. And it is just one of those stories that affects every single human being, as we must hold government to account and not let them hide and pretend that we don't count because they only work for us. Please check that one out as well. And in the meantime, I wish everyone a great, fantastic weekend. Take the time out to smell the roses, and we come back and fight Monday. And that is what we do here. We are tough, we are Australian, and we are proud of all of ourselves, even if our governments are letting us down. Thanks for watching. See you all on the next show.